All right, I think we are going to get started.
Let's do it.
Fantastic. Hello, everyone. Good morning from Chicago, Illinois. Welcome to another session of Lens with Advanced Design. My name is Hector Silva, and we have the pleasure of hosting our very good friend, industrial designer Joey Zeledón, who is based in Spain. Joey, thank you so much for being here. We're very excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an honor, a pleasure. You know how it is.
And a little bit about Joey is Joey believes that good design is like good music. It's familiar, engaging, and makes you feel fantastic. It's something you want to play on repeat. Joey loves to play between the familiar and the new, putting a spin on common archetypes with thoughtful combinations. Prior to Joey working at HP, he was based in the US. He worked at Steelcase and Smart Design in New York City. I'm going to let Joey talk a little more about himself. But other than that, if you're attending, thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions, I highly suggest you ask in the Q&A section of this webinar, and I will integrate them in our conversation. I'm going to hand things over to Joey. So thank you so much for participating. And Joey, you have the floor.
Awesome, thanks, man. And thanks to everyone for joining this Lens session with Advanced Design. It is an honor and a pleasure for me to get to share my point of view with you, and I really hope that you can take something of value away from this time. So let me share my screen. Okay. Can you see?
Yep.
All right. What did I just do? Okay, there we go. Full screen. Okay, and I'm going to take the gum out of my mouth because I just realized I have gum. Otherwise, it might get annoying for you. Okay, so today I want to talk with you about design with wonder. Okay, and you're right if you're thinking this is going to be about the Joey Wonder series. So congratulations if you were assuming that. But first, let me walk you through a little bit of my background. Okay, I won't spend too much time here because I think this can get a little repetitive. But essentially, I've been around the block. I graduated, first of all, in 2006 from Rochester Institute of Technology, Design School, Industrial Design. And since then, I've worked at all of these places. And so first, I was a shoe designer for Clark's for just about 2 years in Boston. And then also in Boston, I worked at Design Continuum for 4 years, actually. And so this was my first experience in consulting. And so I worked on a number of different projects for many different clients in the industry. And then I switched over to Smart Design for an additional 4 years. So a total of 8 years in design consulting. And at Smart Design, similarly to Continuum, I worked for a variety of clients, anyone from like OXO to PepsiCo to Google, Ford, et cetera, et cetera. And then after those 4 years, I was recruited to work for Steelcase. And so I was at Steelcase for just under 3 years, and I designed furniture, obviously, with Steelcase, and thinking, much more kind of spatially, and larger products. Furniture is larger, so you have to think about it much more spatially than, say, tabletop or things that go in drawers. So that was like a really kind of the big scale change for me in my career. So that was really a lot of good learning came from that, and I think really helped me grow beyond just handheld things. And then most recently, I took a role at HP as the head of industrial design in their Barcelona location. And at HP, I've been here for now just over a year and a half, and it's been a fantastic experience getting to work in a new culture and And, you know, with the language combined with, you know, working in, this is the first tech company I've ever worked for. And also, I've never designed printers before joining HP. So a lot of new things all at once, but really great learning experience. And then at the same time as HP, I balance my time and work on, you know, my own studio projects, right? And so that can be anything from, you know, side client work in different industries, but most recently it's been, whoops, I didn't do the change there. But most recently it's been my experiments, my side projects, you know, where I can really unleash my creativity fully, you know, like without constraint. And I think two examples of this have been my Touchy-Feely book, which is the book that I wrote and self-published and launched on Kickstarter. And it's all about emotional ergonomics. And that was, you know, an amazing experience getting to do that and finding the time to do that in my free time. And then the second, of course, is my Kochek chair, which is a furniture piece that I thought of way back in design school at RIT. And then years later, I brought it to life and did a Kickstarter as well, both successfully funded. And it was just a fantastic experience. And these are the kinds of, you know, side projects. I don't even like to think of them as side projects because it really devalues them, but it's really where, you know, kind of my heart is beating a lot of the time, and it really fuels me as a designer. And then on top of that, I created Joey Wonder series, and this series I actually started way back in March when, you know, COVID was just becoming a thing and disrupting all of our lives, and we were all in quarantine, and I was looking for a creative outlet essentially, and essentially what Joey Wonders is a creative exploration where I put spins on these familiar archetypes, right, and design icons using just basic photoshopping skills with existing imagery. And essentially I started doing this for two reasons. The first is I really wanted to continue practicing and exercising my you know, my raw creativity in a way that created something that was really provocative and engaging, actually engaged an audience, right, and built a community. And I think actually a result of that goal, of that reason, has been, you know, really successful with the caption contests that I hold with every post, right? And it's almost become like this communal poetry slam in a way that I really love to see a lot of, you know, all the creative thoughts that people come up with. And the second reason why I started doing this was to begin to show, you know, outwardly, publicly, how I think as a designer, right? And to start to capture my signature style as a designer. Because what I realized in hindsight is that the Kochek chair design, which I included on this collage slide on the bottom right here, what I realized is that design was the original Joey Wonders, because I was really using the same methodology, the same approach, where, you know, I took that, I put a spin essentially on that classic cantilevered frame, steel frame, right? And just replaced the seat with hangers, with a new material. And by doing that, it changed the narrative of the chair, right? It's building on the shoulder of giants, but makes it my own, right? And I think that's, in a lot of ways, that's what I mean when I talk about how good design is like good music, right? It's building on these what came before, but in a way that makes it all your own, right? And so yeah, that really kind of sums up the reason why I began this series. So what does it actually mean to wonder? So what I love about the word wonder is that it's both a verb and a noun. So wonder can be something that it can be an action and a result of that action. So something that you do and something that you feel, or you can elicit a feeling in other people. So wonder as a verb is defined by Cambridge Dictionary as to think about things in a questioning and sometimes doubting way, right? And so this is pure curiosity, right? It's something that we're all familiar with. We all do as designers. We ask why? Why is that the way it is, right? And that's where you need to start. And that's where I start when I think of these. But then wonder as a noun is a feeling of great surprise and admiration caused by seeing or experiencing something that is strange and new. And so I start with a curiosity, or I ask these questions, the why, but then ultimately I want to end with this wonder as a noun. So from a verb to a noun, this results, this creating and eliciting this feeling of surprise and delight in whoever sees and experiences, these Joey Wonders posts, or maybe someday turning them into, actual products, right? But how do you design with wonder, right? That's probably what you're actually wondering, and I was wondering that myself. How do I actually do this, right? And I think designers innately know how this is done, right? I'm sure many of you are nodding your head, like, yeah, obviously we all do it, but not everyone understands that process of how you get from verb to noun. But essentially, for me, how I design with wonder, how I do this technique is I think of it like word association, but with imagery, right? With things you see. So it's really about seeing patterns, among disparate elements, seeing patterns, things that are familiar, similar, whether it's interactions or the way something looks, details, and kind of playing with those, right? It's like mixing and matching, and it's really like, in a way, it's almost like a game from childhood, right? That we would play about seeing these patterns. I feel like the game of memory or something like that. So there's a lot of serendipity involved in this process, in this approach. But luckily, there is a design thinking tool that exists that puts this in a bit more of a logical formula, right? So it's not so ambiguous explanation, because I think for me, it's much more about intuition and just feeling and going with it. And this technique is called SCAMPER. And this is nothing new. So you're probably, again, all nodding your head saying, yeah, we've heard of SCAMPER too. But if you haven't, here's what it is. So SCAMPER essentially is an acronym that basically it gives you these jumping off points, these thought starters, right? Of different angles that you can enter, right? Entry points of beginning to wonder and ideate. It's really an ideation tool, right, at its best. And this tool is really commonly used for design thinking purposes, and it can be used from like super dry and boring design, to all the way to artsy, artistic stuff, which is where the Joey Wonders, I think, is pushing, and everything in between. So I've used it for myself in a way. So here we have substitute. So what we ask, what materials, rules, or process can be changed? Combine. Can this be combined with another idea? Adapt. How would a radical context change the idea? Magnify. What can be made bigger or exaggerated? Put to other uses. What else could this be used for? Eliminate. What if something were smaller or removed entirely? And rearrange. How could the sequence or patterns change? And just a side note, this was invented by Alex Osborne. I don't know much about this person, but just wanted to give him credit. And so this is SCAMPER, right? And so you can imagine how and why it would be useful for coming up with new ideas. So now I'm going to go through some Joey Wonders examples just to show you as proof, that it actually does work, and there is a correlation between the Joey Wonders that I create and the SCAMPER method. And I just want to do a quick time check. Oh yeah, I'm flying through this. Okay. I should actually slow down. Okay, let's jump in. All right, so let's start with substitute. So what we ask, what materials, rules, or process can be changed? And so here I'm showing secret combination. This is a caption I came up with. And so obviously what was substituted was, you know, the dial from the master lock with this scaled up nipple, a very large nipple, and super provocative. So that's, you can see what I mean about what I was trying to do, be provocative, but it's more than just a provocation, right? I think what I find really interesting here is that it's somehow maintaining the same interaction that you would have with a master lock, with that dial, right? You're turning, but you suddenly see this correlation between, I mean, two completely different things, but all in the same motion that you would, this twisting. And then a second example for substitute is Dust Bowl, captioned by M3 Design. I love this caption. And I mean, I think this one is like super self-explanatory, right? The bowling ball replaced the Dyson, I don't even know what you'd call it, the Dyson ball that was there before. And this one was a pretty easy one to do, but I'm not entirely sure what this did by substituting it. I mean, both of the balls roll, so both work. Both of them work, but I think, I don't know, this creates like some kind of playfulness more than just what it was before. I think a lot of times what I tried to do here is in a way take some of these designs off of their pedestal. That's also something like kind of deep down that I'm having this internal struggle of, like, you know, I sometimes I don't really like the egotistical side of the design industry. So a lot of my intention, without even knowing, is like, you know, taking it off its pedestal, right? It's because I think design tends to ride a high horse, and so I think that's sometimes when I come up with these things, that's where it's coming from. Just as a side note, and just to give you some insight into my psyche. Okay, so combine. We ask with combine, can this be combined with another idea? So this one's pretty straightforward, right? So here we have loungewear, captioned by Charlie Nunn. And this simple combination was actually my most successful post on Instagram. And I think because it was maybe the most recognizable, and also related to fashion. I think fashion posts tend to do better, but that doesn't matter. Anyways, the point here is, you know, I think it's about the combination, right, of the shoe with the chair, but also playing with scale. So that's something that I want to mention here, is that, you know, these scamper techniques can be combined, obviously, right? So, you know, this might be a combined example, but it also could be a scale example, right? Like looking to magnify or eliminate or reduce. So I think some of the best posts and the best, you know, creations or Joey Wonders are the ones that really combine the best of the method. And then we have adapt. So with adapt, we ask, how would a radical context change the idea? And so here we're featuring Charabanera, captioned by, I don't know if, I don't want to mess up the name, Yash Bansali. This is such a fantastic caption. And I think this is pretty obvious, right? So you take the Frank Gehry wiggle chair, and you know, just by putting it in this context of a pasta maker, suddenly it changes how it's perceived, right? Maybe you don't see it as a chair any longer. Maybe, you know, if you're not a designer, you might not even know that it was, you know, what chair it was, right? So people might just see like this cardboard pasta thing, but, you know, us as designers, we know it's the chair, and so it plays with the perception. It plays with the process of how it was made. And also for adapt, I really wanted to include this one because it's one of my favorites, but so here, this is attention grabber, captioned by Jeremiah Beetham. And here, what was interesting about this one is that I didn't actually do a mashup here, obviously, right? So this was it was more a true comparison, right? So you're seeing like, you just side by side. I think it's actually stronger this way. Whereas if I took the Alessi juicer and put it in a claw machine box, I don't know. Well, maybe it could have worked, but it would have been a nightmare for me to find that kind of imagery, right? So a lot of the process of this is also finding images that work together of existing things. Time check. Okay. Yeah, so let's go to the next one. So next we have magnify. So what can be made bigger or exaggerated? And this here we call a binding contract, captioned by Zoe Gomer. And obviously this is, here I magnified the paperclip and combined it, right? Using multiple, magnify and combine it with a bike lock. And I think this one really plays with your head, because I think from a distance, zoomed out, if you squint, you first see the paperclip, that archetype is very recognizable. But when you zoom in and look closer, you see the kryptonite lock, right? So it kind of jumps between the two, which is really fascinating. As you can tell, as I talk through these, like, there's no obvious conclusion here, right? It's not trying to solve anything, but it's very open-ended. So keep that in mind. All right. And then also for magnify, we have cut to the chase, captioned by Mason Day. And this one, again, this is magnify, but also combined, right? So here we're taking the Chase Lounge by Ames and combining it with Fiskars. So either with half of a Fiskars, right? So in a way, this is also eliminate, which is coming after this one or later on. But anyways, here this one's interesting because it kind of plays with your head a bit, because you don't know if the Chase Lounge was scaled down or the Fiskars was scaled up. So I think this one has a really interesting tension here that it plays with. And something I really enjoy particularly about this one, the detail of the chase, it being the part of the scissors where you put your thumb through, because of this context with the half of the Fiskars, it almost makes it feel like it was melted plastic, right? So it was like a defect in the product, which I thought was fascinating. All right, next we have put to other uses. So we asked, what else could this be used for? And here we're featuring Peel to Burn, captioned by Kobe Trout. Peel to Burn was one of my favorite captions of all time. And so this one obviously is taking the OXO Good Grips potato peeler handles and combining it with a jump rope, right? And so it's putting the handles to another use, essentially, right? But this one, I think, is actually one of the most realistic, like real, producible Joey Wonders that I've made beyond coat check chair. And I think, I think about these Joey Wonders kind of in a spectrum, or maybe it's like two groups, right? One is the absurd and it's very artistic, and the other one is actually, it could be a real thing, and it could be beneficial or have a function, right? And so I really like that about this approach, is that it could actually manifest in different outcomes. And so the hope for me is, I'm able to think of more of like these truly functional design outcomes that could actually be made into new products, right? Repurposed products. And then, of course, put to other uses. I already talked about the coat check chair, so I'll skip over this one. For eliminate, here I'm showing a light celebration, captioned by Sarah Das. And this one, so I was struggling, honestly, to find an example for eliminate. So this one we'll have to do, because the thought here, right? Well, we ask, first of all, what if something were smaller or removed entirely? And I mean, in this example, the thing that was removed was the light fixture, right? But it was replaced and combined with the piñata donkey. And this one's actually a really good example of what I was talking about before, about, you know, taking design off of its pedestal. So I really love this one. This one has a special place in my heart because it makes design really accessible, right? It's like truly design within reach, you know, because I think of, you know, so many families, kids' birthday parties, you know, where you have a piñata, and it's like seeing it in this context really just makes that, you know, fancy lamp just a great thing for a piñata, nothing more, right? And I love creating narratives like that, and kind of repositioning high design into really practical purposes. And then lastly, we have rearrange. So with rearrange, we ask, how could the sequence or pattern change? And here I'm featuring save it for later. This is a caption I came up with. And this is also one of my favorites. It's one of the more subtle ones, so it didn't get as much of engagement as some of the others. But for me, it just, I don't know, it has, maybe, I don't even know how to explain it, but it just so playful, you know, and I think so subtle in the way that basically it's turning those the balls on the end of the spokes, right, into gum, or you start to see them as like gum balls, right, because you see the chewed up piece placed back on there. So in a sense, it's rearranging this pattern, it's changing the sequence, but in a way where it's combining it with something else. And then last but not least, the last example I have is edit undo. So I think this one is actually the most kind of the best example of rearrange in its purest form, because I mean, clearly here we're elongating, we're exaggerating the ratio between the eraser and the pencil, the number 2 pencil. And by doing that, by rearranging this ratio, the sequence, it changes how you would imagine this tool to be used, right? So because of this ratio change, because of the exaggeration on the eraser, you're thinking, oh, okay, so this person is going to be doing a lot more erasing than creating. And so I think I really love changing the narrative there in a way that it really changes how something is perceived, but also experienced when it's in use. And then that brings us to our conclusion. So, yeah, so in conclusion, this technique can be used to help you think of good ideas, technique being the SCAMPER technique, right? It can help you think good ideas, bad ideas, absurd ideas, you know, during ideation, during your wondering and your curiosity that might actually lead you to something brilliant, right? You might strike gold or you might not, but that's really the fun of it. And it's fun because it's about play, right? It's playing with design, and it's not taking it too seriously. And it really, I love it because it really allows you to get lost in your thoughts and get lost in your creativity, right? And in a lot of ways, it's very similar to songwriting, the same approach, right? When you, in poetry, when you create associations, you know, and even like rap, right, or songwriting, and thinking of rhyming structures, and a lot of that is getting lost in thinking of different associations and seeing patterns and kind of going off on tangents, and it's just a super fun process that I highly recommend. And I would just say, you know, just to give you a peek into the process of Joey Wonders, isn't all that glamorous, to be honest, because mostly it's just me here sitting alone in my apartment, talking to myself, muttering to myself, pacing back and forth, you know, and I'm like, it's like self-storming, right? I'm off on a tangent. I'm thinking about like, oh, how can I spin, whatever it may be, and then I go off on, sometimes I have to like leave that there and then circle back and look at other things, go for a walk. I mean, in a way, it's almost like this mad scientist kind of thing if you really viewed it from like two-way mirror. I have to think of more glamorous ways to really showcase this process of how I actually think of these. But yeah, more to come there. So thanks so much. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I'd love to hear comments, questions. Yeah, let's chat.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joey.
So I will stop sharing.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for a awesome presentation. I think that gives us a fantastic insight on what you're wondering and how you are structuring, your posts, and that they're not just random, that there is justification and purpose behind everything that you put up on Instagram, at least for this series.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. I'm really happy to hear it was well received.
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions to ask you, and then some questions from the audience. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Fantastic. I just want to make sure my audio isn't being weird. Okay. Yeah, essentially, Scamper. That is awesome. I've actually never heard of that before. And honestly, I think that's a really good equation that students can use in their own projects.
Yeah, 100%. It's I mean, it can be used, for any ideas, right? For any creative project, and you can use it, more conservatively, or you can use it very extreme, and I think for my purpose, I use it, extreme. I try to go as provocative as possible.
Now, do you only use that with your own personal kind of exploration and work, or have you ever applied those techniques at in your full-time job?
Yeah, no, I apply it with everything, honestly. But so at HP, for example, like, we like the design team, we apply it, I'd say, every day. I think, but again, it's a little bit more, maybe with more tact, a little bit more conservative approach, right? Because in design, as we know, it's all about I think specifically industrial design, all about rethinking archetypes, right? What came before, and um, most recently, what we've been working on has been trying to rethink and kind of spin the classic plotter, right? Like a large format printer for architects and designers, and what could that look like, right? And how can it not be like this ugly piece of equipment that gets dusty in a back room somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is this is design, right? It's just how you use it, essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah, here are some questions that are coming in from our audience. They like to know, here's a question from Rohan, and he wants to know if you can please elaborate on how Wonder plays a part in your studios or your previous employer's work.
Yeah, I think I just answered it. I think it's it's again like it's part of the design process, right? I think we all need to wonder, if you want to call it wonder, you want to call it design or ideation. I mean, I think for me, it's really, no matter what project I'm working on, whether it's for these posts or client work, whatever it may be, we always have to ask ourselves what came before and what could come next, right?
Mm-hmm.
What came before always is an archetype. You know, archetypes are in everything. And that's something that is familiar, right? It's familiar in society, and it's recognizable, right? So we need to take that, but create something new. And so I always talk about the 80-20 ratio in design. And that's, in my opinion, I think usually the best combination, where you have, in a new design, 80% is familiar, right? Something recognizable, the familiar cues that came before, with a 20% something new, right? You rarely ever want 100% something new, because it's going to be a tough pill to swallow. I think it's just going to be hard for humanity to adapt that into their life, right? Because we're creatures of habit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's why it's so powerful to be able to play in this space of wonderment, right? Questioning these archetypes and manipulating them and creating, in a sense, interventions, right? Of a new combination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, even with this series of, kind of combining these products, like you mentioned, that we are very familiar with, on your Instagram page, you also ask us some very intriguing questions, that kind of go, they kind of coincide with these images. And I really love these questions, because some questions are sometimes trying to stir conversation, and they're very focused to our industry. And for example, one question is, what is your favorite product smell? Which is so, um, it's very unique,
Oh yeah,
because we don't think of,
yeah,
and just looking at the comments, when people reply, their responses are funny. Um, yeah, I would love to hear more about that. People here talking about Play-Doh when they open up Legos, Crayolas, crayons, you know.
it's yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. You know I'm I don't quite know why I asked those questions, but it's more of like, you know just to stir the pot a little bit, and to kind of change the narrative, to get people thinking differently beyond just the normal eye candy that is on Instagram.
Right?
Um, and and yeah, it's true. Like I really do believe that multisensorial design needs to be talked about more. Right? There's just so much kind of unturned stones when we think about smell and sound and these things on top of sight. I mean, it's just, there's so much more you can do with that, right? Because when we talk about familiarity and familiar archetypes, you know, so far we've just been talking about what you see,
Mm-hmm.
right? Something that looks familiar. Oh yeah, that was a whatever it may be that came before, right? I know what that is. But you could do the same with the smell, right? I mean, uh, a familiar smell versus a foreign smell. Now, how do you play with that, right? When you think about the new car smell, right? People come to expect the new car smell. But if that chemical, that chemistry of off-gassing, as terrible as it is, if that was manipulated and changed, it would completely, I think, disrupt the experience, right? People would be super bummed out. I don't know.
Yep.
And same for sound. I mean, just to use the car example, I mean, the way a door closes, is it, does it sound kind of milky, dampened? That sound, it sounds like luxury versus something that's just sounding cheap, and you can
Right.
hear the construction in the sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of these things are so important for us as designers to really consider in our process, and in archetypes, when we think about coming up with something new and familiar, something that's familiar. And I think with smell too, smell is super nostalgic, right? And so smell is loaded with um, familiar archetypes and flavors, sense that bring us back to places and things that are super deep and personal.
Absolutely. We're going to start diving into some of these questions here. We have a question that is very specific to your full-time, day-to-day. This is a question by Megan, and her question is, has the pandemic shifted your perspective on your HP designs at all? or have you seen shifts within the industry?
What was the first question? I think you cut out for a second.
Sure. Has the pandemic shifted your perspective on your HP designs?
Hmm. Oh yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. You know, I think I would imagine the pandemic has shifted almost everyone's perspective of whatever industry they're in, right? I think
Hmm.
now we have to start thinking about the working from home scenario, right? Do we have a play there, right? Is that a market that we can tap into? And also pivoting existing product. How do you suddenly start to market for that, right, in an authentic way? Um, and also thinking beyond working from home when people go back to the office, and how many people go back to the office, how many days a week do they go back to the office, how what size will the new office be? I mean, clearly supposedly it's going to be much smaller, so what is that going to be used for, and how do our products fit into that context? So 100% this has changed how we think about our stuff.
Here's a question about this Wonder Series that you just presented about. Um, what is the ideation process like? Do you have a collection of these popular designs? And then how do you select and how do you start mashing them together?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I have I have folders filled with categorized and Excel spreadsheet, a super nerdy method, where I have kind of thought starters. I think of one thing, and then I move on to the next, and then eventually they all kind of blend together or not. But essentially, it's just like throwing like a Google image searches,
Hmm.
dumping images into folders, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's the Ames lounge chair. Sure, I'm gonna do something with that sometime, you know. And it's bit by bit, but it's very kind of scatterbrained.
Hmm.
And a lot of the times too, I mentioned before, just kind of like, you know, talking to myself alone in my apartment, thinking about these things. But I also like, phone a friend. I call, my life partner, Martel Esposito. I have to give her a shout out because she's always willing to like listen to my crazy zany ideas and like, says, oh, why don't you consider this or that? And she points me in, kind of fresh, thought patterns, which I need. I think I hit so many blocks in this creative process. It's unreal, but that's more or less the approach, right? And then, I would say I kind of break the approach into two camps, right? The first one is like um, actually coming up with the combinations. So that one's very divergent. I think about this or that, and it's less about the beauty of it, but more about the idea. And then once I come up with the idea, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, awesome, there it is. I kind of like light bulb, Ames lounge chair as a shoe. Yeah, awesome. Okay, that's gonna that's gonna be a hit. And then I'm like, then I switch modes and I go into convergent, and I'm thinking, okay, I have to find high res images. Okay, so now I go Google search Ames lounge chair, easy peasy, plenty of those to play with. But then I'm like, woman's foot, type that in, not so easy to find like a nice looking foot that's high enough resolution. I was looking for like black nail polish, which I did find for that one. But that image was slightly smaller in resolution than the Ames chair. So if you zoom in, you'll notice that. So I had to really work it in Photoshop to make it look kind of believable. But essentially, if I zoom out, really those are the two kind of, the diverge and the converge.
Yeah, I think searching for images in itself, it's like its own project because it requires
Totally.
you have to bring your vision to life, and it just requires time to find the perfect image.
Completely. Oh my gosh, it's super tedious. It's super tedious
Hmm.
because I have so many, and I have so many like in my backlog ideas of like, oh, that's gonna be great, but when I go to look for images, I'm like,
Mm.
shit, like this is gonna be near impossible. So that just kind of sits there in a backlog. So I don't know. I might have to start taking my own photos of things, which is which is not ideal. Trying to avoid that.
It would be fantastic. After you continue the series, or you wrap up the series, but in the future, if you have a folder of rejections of like failed experiments, that would be really cool to see what you were thinking and how that just didn't mash up well.
No, it's a good idea. I think people would appreciate that for sure. The bloopers.
Yeah.
Yeah, another thing. Sorry, another thing to mention too is now that we're talking about like the world of pixels and resolution. Um, Actually, the my most recent post, I needed to kind of deviate from just using existing images. So the one with the kiss and the Pantone chair. So that one, I searched far and wide for a side view image of Gene Simmons' face with his tongue out, and that was not possible. So then I was like, all right, why don't I just do a Photoshop illustration? And so that's what I ended up doing, and I think it came out pretty decent, And so I think now that I've kind of expanded or deviated from my kind of signature style of using existing images, I think it actually opens up more doors. So now when I kind of run into a spot where I can't find something, I'm like, okay, I'll just create some original artwork, and it seems to be okay. But I don't know why I was hesitant to kind of do that initially, but it just makes sense now.
And I think it works. I mean, I'm looking at the image right now, and this looks fantastic. Honestly, you can sell these prints, and I think they would. It's like what you're creating is like an original art from art. I don't know what it's called.
Well, it's like it's pop art is what it is.
Mhm.
It's like the Andy Warhol approach, right?
Yep.
Um, but no, you're right. You're right. I think, yeah, and I think what this can be in the end is, yeah, I could sell like prints of these individually, or I was thinking it would be great to put together a book, similarly to Touchy Feely, where it's like, I don't know, 100 of these, in a book format. Um, yeah, so TBD on that one, but
That'd be fantastic. Yeah, that sounds great. Well, I have one more question to ask you, and this is from an audience coming from Gerardo, and his question is, at one point in your design journey, did you start to create and develop your book, Touchy Feely?
at what point did I start?
Yep.
Great question. Yeah, I started when I was at Continuum, Design Continuum in Boston. So that was like 2010-ish time. So I started doing these drawings of people interacting with things, and I had the yellow as the object, the gray, the neutral gray as the human, and just started doing a few of them every day, and built up a massive library collection of them. And then it wasn't until 2017 that I started putting it together in a book. So I started writing like the poetry that goes along with it, the emotional reaction. So it was similar to the chair, right? Kochek chair. The book was also like a slow burn
Mm.
side project. Yeah, and, but that's when it started.
And the book is actually pretty awesome for those who don't have it. Uh,
Nice play.
it's right on my bookshelf right in front of me. Um, are these is Touchy Feely still available on your website, or is there going to be uh,
Yeah, I have a handful left. I don't know. I want to say like maybe 10 books left, but I need to. I think they're in storage because as it says right now on my website that we're out of stock, but I need to replenish that. Um, so yes, we do have some books left, not many. Um, so yeah, and I think to do like a new batch is going to be. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's possible. So this is like you know, collector's edition here.
Absolutely, especially if yours is signed by Joey Zeledón.
That's worth millions now.
You know what you can do,
Oh,
Joey? You know, because I know putting together is definitely no easy to do. Um, you know, what you can do to get it to the masses, you can always also sell it as a PDF or something, and
that's a good point.
that has its own, you know, pros and cons, but just an option. I know a lot of people are always asking for it.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah, I might have to do that because, yeah, to do a whole like another batch of 500 is,
Hmm.
phew, yeah, I'd have to like raise funds again. But I don't know if I could put it again on Kickstarter, the second iteration. But yeah,
Well, Joey, it's always a pleasure to reconnect with you. You know, you're doing amazing things. Thank you for being an awesome human, but also for contributing to the community in a very genuine way. And I think a lot of us really learn from what you put out there and the conversations that you're trying to stir. So we really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. And for those who joined us from around the world, thank you so much. And until next time.
awesome. Thanks a lot, Hector. Yeah, it was a pleasure, man. Always a pleasure. And yeah, we'll keep it real, keep going, and keep doing your thing too. I'm always impressed by you, pushing forward and doing your thing. So thanks a lot.
Take care. Be in touch. Thank you,
All
everyone.
right.
Have a good Sunday.
Thanks, everyone.